just, yeah, I've done my prostration, so if you want to do yours, you're very welcome. Okay, so we'll all do our jobs, all prostrating to the Buddha, to listen to Buddha's teachings. How amazing. Okay, I've got to find some text. While you're doing that, I'll look for the text. Okay. Oh dear, where is it? Books. Okay. All right. Happy to see you all. Imagine you all there if I can't see you. Here I am in Santa Fe on 4 o'clock on a nice, shiny, sunny Saturday afternoon. I gave up coffee about more than 5 years ago, and I never think about it, but suddenly I'm obsessed with coffee again. So I had 2 espressos this morning, and I feel like I've taken a drug. So if I keel over, you'll know what's happened. I can't believe the effect of it. I just can't believe it. I'm so shocked. So now I'm obsessed with coffee again, and I have one every 3 days. I couldn't cope with every day. So it's just ridiculous, isn't it? A silly old espresso. Okay, so here I am, drunk from coffee. Can you all hear me? Did you hear that silly story? Okay. So okay, I'm ready with our text, and we're sitting here together from wherever we are, in Melbourne, in wherever we are, and we're thinking we're going to listen to Lama Yeshe's teachings through my mouth. I'm his daughter, so I hope I'm interpreting Lama properly. That's really important. So that we can think about how to develop our true nature using this marvelous, seemingly simple technique. It is technically simple, using the 2 modes of meditation, but a really specific approach to realizing the ultimate reality of our mind, which is its emptiness. First, based upon understanding its conventional nature, which is its clarity. You know, this marvelous mirror, this mirror-like mind of ours, in order to clean it completely so that we can cognize exactly what exists without mistake, which is the potential of every single mind, which is a pretty radical idea, I tell you, but this is Buddha's view. Okay, so
could we please offer mandala?
Go on then. Yes. Do it with enthusiasm.
Yes.
Vigor and enthusiasm. So Jason's going to sing the prayer in Tibetan. We imagine we're offering all the marvelous things of the universe, pile them all up, use your creative imagination, pile them all up and make an offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Okay, go.
Saji poki shuksing metok tramri rabling jin yihide gen padi. Sangye jing du mikte ua yidro kunam dak jing la che pashog. Jetsun lahamadam pakyenam ki kuikala kien se chuzin trig. Jitatsam pedu jetzinma lahazag yeche ki chahapa wabtu so.
Imagine Buddha happily receiving our marvelous offering.
Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami.
That was definitely vigorous. Wonderful. Okay, so now we do this other little prayer, which is the first two lines reiterating our reliance on the Buddha for those of us who are committed to being Buddhists, who've decided that. And the second 2 lines making this amazing, altruistic, vast motivation or reason or purpose for our being together for this remaining few hours today, to think about all these things so that we can take all this information as tools, so we can develop our amazing potential, so we can be a Buddha to many of us sentient beings. That's our long-term goal. And as His Holiness says, always aspire to do what is most beneficial and long-term better than short-term, so best. So we then just think this as I sing the Tibetan. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye dropa shok Sangye charang soke chognam la, jangcho baru dagni kyap suchi, dagi chonyen gi personam ki, jola penche sangye drupa shok. May I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits from listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay, thank you so much. All right. So why don't we start with our little meditation that we did yesterday, the first one, which is the 9-round breathing. So get your body comfy. Just look, check the 8 or so points. If you're in full lotus, great. If in half lotus, great. Ordinary cross-legged, great. That's fine. That's the first one. Second is your hands in your lap, like this if you want. Thumbs touching, left underneath, in the mudra of meditation. Third is, however you're sitting, whether it's in a chair or whatever, have yourself upright. Don't slump into the chair. Your body upright, but your muscles relaxed. Flop the muscles. Keep the bones upright. Then your head, slightly tilted forward, chin tucked in, jaw relaxed, lips apart slightly, the tip of the tongue behind the top teeth, just near the palate. All the yogis over the centuries have found when you're meditating for many hours that you don't dribble. Just so practical. And finally, your eyes looking down beneath your eyelids as if you're looking along your nose towards the ground. So settle into this position and then forget about it, because your body doesn't meditate. This is just the position that has been found to be most conducive for the mind to do its job properly. To settle into this position. So now we're going to use our breath, and this is not a concentration meditation. Specifically, you're using your concentration, obviously, but it's not specifically a concentration technique, because in a concentration technique, you're consciously not using discursive thought. But here, we're going to focus, but we're going to use thinking. And we're going to steady our mind by imagining the air, the first 3 breaths, all going out through the right nostril. And it's like yucky smoke. It is all our attachment, neediness, expectation, bottomless pit of dissatisfaction, possessive energy, attachment, totally disappearing like yucky smoke into space. The next 3, you visualize all your aversion, all the way from the most volatile anger, irritation, annoyance, frustration, upset, anxiety, worry, depression, despair. There's this spectrum of responses of aversion. We all have one of those. Totally leaving through your left nostril, wanting it so delightedly to disappear into smoke. Because the reality is it has no inherent nature. These good and bad are real conventionally, but ultimately, like everything, they have no intrinsic nature. Whereas we grasp at them as absolute and as real, like Lama told us yesterday. So even thinking these negative and positive are functioning as negative and positive, but they have no intrinsic nature. This is very encouraging. The third 3 breaths, through both, out yucky smoke, all the ignorance, indifference, uncaring, fundamentalism, narrow-mindedness, function of ignorance energy, disappearing like yucky smoke into space. Then adding to that, this, when you breathe in, when you're breathing out through the right, you then breathe in through the left, all the blissful non-attachment energy of the universe, coming in like blissful white light, filling you completely, and then driving out all the yucky attachment through the right 3 times. And then when you breathe out through the right, the left, all the anger, you breathe in through the right, all the blissful non-aversion energy of the universe, all the holy beings, our own potential, through the right nostril, filling us completely and driving out through the left, all the rubbish aversion, disappearing into space. And then breathing in blissful radiant light of wisdom that drives out all the yucky ignorance energy through both nostrils. So do it at your own pace. And it's your breath, it's your breathing, which is physical, so because your mind is inextricably linked to the breathing. This is the tantric model of the universe, the mind, the body. But also it's your mind wanting this, imagining this, aspiring to do this, which is exactly what makes it happen. Okay, at your own pace. 3 breaths out through the right, attachment. 3 breaths out through the left, anger. 3 breaths out through both, ignorance. At your own pace. And if you get lost, just start again, don't worry. Relax now. That's about 7 minutes, 7 minutes, good quality 7 minutes. Maybe even more, maybe 8. To steady the body and to steady the mind. You see, that this is just to explain briefly, this is the Vajrayana model, the Vajrayana explanation of the body and the mind is it's very specific, and this is what's related to when we go through the death process, we learn to understand this. And this Tibetan medical system is also based on this model. And it's very interesting, because we've got gross level, we've got this, as we discussed briefly yesterday, gross level of consciousness, which is what we posit in the West, is the gross of our sensory, and then the grosser level of our conceptuality, all the thoughts and chatting away, which is where the brain is involved indeed. So when in the death process, when you go through the first 4 stages, by the time you stop breathing, you're dead. That's what the world thinks. There's nothing, it looks like there's no indication of life, because our assumption of life is indicated by the presence of the brain and the heart and the blah, blah, blah. That's not the Buddha's view of, that's the gross mind. But now subtle mind has kicked in. So subtle mind, and the only time we ever access that is when we dream. That's our subtle mind. And that's when people have out-of-body experiences. People see in the future and the past, because the subtle mind can do that. And of course, when you're a great yogi, you can use this completely, like Lama Yeshe is talking about when we've achieved Mahamudra. So achieve single point of concentration, sorry. So the relationship is this, we've got these 72,000 subtle channels, like a subtle nervous system. And coursing through all those channels are these different wind energies, prana. Now, this is how we used to talk 1,000 years ago, I'm sure 800 years ago in our model of medicine in the world, the elements and the four elements. That's still the model that's used here. There's detailed descriptions of these 4 elements and their intimate relationship. Lama Yeshe mentioned it yesterday in the emptiness chapter. So all these different wind energies coursing through the different 72,000 subtle channels. Now, this is the point. Inextricably linked to those winds are our mental states, all our states of mind. I mean, this is clearly a very different model, from how we talk in the modern world, the materialist philosophical view. So this is what's interesting when we talk about, as Lama Zopa said, in the Kala Chakra Tantra, the word sutra and the word tantra refer either to a type of teaching or to a text. So in the Kala Chakra tantric text, he said there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal means mind, cognition, thoughts, feelings, emotions. External means the physical elements, including the body. That's external, as well as the external out there, because the body is of the same character as the 4 elements outside there, isn't it? I mean, this body is exactly the same character as a flower, a table, a rock. It's the 4 elements. But it happens to be this particular set of the 4 elements is imbued with a consciousness. So this consciousness, this mind of ours coursing through these 72 subtle channels, inextricably linked to all those wind energies. So there's this intimate, inextricable relationship. So as Rinpoche says, and this is explaining karma to us, whenever even just your mind, let's say your mind is loving, your mind is actually thinking loving thoughts. This naturally impacts upon the wind energies related to your love, because they've all got these different states that might have their own wind energies. Your Tibetan doctor, when she feels your pulses, she can feel exactly which wind energies are balanced and imbalanced, like your acupuncturist does. But even more precisely in this model, they know which part of your mind is linked to that. So if you've got lots of anxiety, which is your mind, you can feel the winds completely berserk. So if your mind is peaceful and loving, those winds will be peaceful. So when the mind is loving, that literally purifies your winds, which in turn create the cause to have a healthy body, because the winds, the status of your winds is what health is. And then eventually, in turn, karmically, that impacts upon even the external elements. So you wake up one life with all the elements beautifully organized, which is good environmental karma. So sickness, for example, when we get, say, people with COVID-19 right now, any sickness, there's 2 results of negativity in the past in terms of killing. One is the experience similar to the cause, which is where you get harmed or you get sick, but you get harmed or you die or people kill you. But the environmental result is that the physical world is yucky and impacts upon you. Well, that is the result of your past anger, past killing, from many, many, many lifetimes ago. So whatever you think now impacts upon your winds, which in turn creates the cause for you to have a health or ill health, which in turn creates the cause for the external elements to be harmonious or not. So we are literally the creators of our universe. We are literally the creators of the universe over a long, long, long time. So this kind of COVID-19, as far as the environment is concerned, is the result probably of 1,000, 10,000 lifetimes ago, collective karma of collective killing, such that this physical world, which includes other human beings, will actually harm us if we touch them. It's like you might have an allergy to peanuts. The air might be polluted, the water polluted, the food bad condition. That's direct result of your killing in the past from countless lifetimes ago. We are the creators. We don't need a creator. We don't need another boss. We don't need anybody pulling the strings. We don't need punishers and rewarders. We are the boss, which is a pretty incredible view. This is the karmic view, the Buddha's view of the universe. So even just doing that meditation steadies your wind energy, steadies the anger, therefore, steadies the attachment, therefore, steadies the ignorance, therefore, when you can steady the winds, The body and mind are interdependent. Okay. So I think, were there many questions left over from yesterday, Amy, or there new questions this morning, or what?
I think we asked all the questions yesterday, and there's no new questions yet.
Okay, fantastic. All right, very good. Okay, so hang on. My stand has gone off. All right, so now then, so what we talked about yesterday, we're using Lama Yeshe's book, Mahamudra, How to Discover Our True Nature. We tried to describe a little bit what Mahamudra is. So Mahamudra is Sanskrit, great seal. So it's this kind of a colloquial term that they've created, referring to, it's a word that is basically synonymous with emptiness. So it has this nice taste, because everything that exists ultimately is actually sealed, is actually defined by its emptiness. Of course, it's abstract to us, this idea. It's the ultimate nature of everything that exists. There's nothing that exists that isn't empty of intrinsic character. There's nothing that exists that isn't interdependent, as Lama tells us. So I think it's very helpful. We read Lama's chapter, very marvelous, and that's expressing the final view of emptiness, the final view, the view expressed, as Lama says, by Nagarjuna and the great yogis Nagarjuna and Tsongkhapa. So it's specifically the presentation of the Buddhist school of thought. There are many over the centuries that you learned about when you study Buddhist tenets, and they do this in the monastic universities. Over the centuries, there are many views that have come from people interpreting Buddhist teachings, each for a different type of mind. So this is called Buddhist tenets. And the one that Lama was describing yesterday is the view of what's called the consequentialist middle way view, the Madhyamika, and there's different schools of thought there, and the one we're discussing is the one that's called the consequentialist. But the Buddha taught various views, different views, each of which is where he diverged from the Hindu explanations of the nature of self. That's why Buddha diverged. And there are various views, various interpretations of this selflessness. So one way of presenting all of that, and Lama taught it, said it, implied it in his chapter, is called the two truths. So let's look a little bit at this. The two truths. Conventional, the way things exist conventionally, and the way things exist ultimately. So right now, Buddha says, we have in our mind naturally, as a result of this root delusion called ignorance in Tibetan, ma-ripa, unawareness. And this ignorance is a very specific ignorance. Because of this specific ignorance, and I'll describe, we now live in the two extreme views. We're way off the plot. We're not anywhere near the actual reality. We've got two extreme views. And we have to try and fix these two views to get to be on track with the two correct views, according to Buddha, of how things exist. And then when we've got these two together, we can see how they're integrated. And this is when we're really on the right track. Right now, when we hear them not only correctly, but we hear them even as opposite. We hear them as contradictory. So this ignorance, what is this? So like I was saying yesterday, In the Buddhist model of the mind, Buddha teaches and when we look at the mental consciousness, forget about the sensory, we've got 3 categories of states of mind. There's no fourth. The first lot are the negative, neurotic, deluded, fear-based, I-based, all those rooted in this ignorance, known colloquially as ego grasping, or as Lama called it, ego mind. It's his own term for it. It's this primordially deep, the deepest, or the root misconception, the root lie, the root delusion, the root affliction. Lama in Mahamudra has got 21 different synonyms, most of which he made up in his wish to help communicate with us the way our crazy mind works, you know. And this is unique to the Buddha's take on things. I've been unmuted.
Just
How long have you been hearing me?
for about 10 seconds.
Oh, good, okay. Because I just thought it and it unmuted. I don't think I even...
It's happened again, Venerable Robina.
Oh no, she's muted deliberately.
okay.
You don't want to hear the sound of my nose blowing. Okay. Okay. So what is this? So these are these delusions. This is, you know, the neurotic, deluded, afflicted, disturbing, ridiculous, off the wall misconceptions. These are the source of our suffering, the source of all sentient beings suffering, the source of why we harm others, and the source of therefore life after life after life of misery. So we've got to, so this is where the Lam Rim fits beautifully. In junior school, we begin to subdue the servants of those minds. We control our body and we control our speech. It's very logical, you know. Lama doesn't talk about this at all in this book because it's not relevant to Mahamudra, but I'm talking about it here because it's helpful for us to get the bigger picture, you know. So Buddha doesn't give us a look at the mind yet. It's too advanced. He says, just control the servants of your mind, baby. Don't kill, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partners. Just control yourself. Behave nicely. It seems almost so cute. It's like a joke. You know, your mother would say, behave nicely. We think, who cares about behavior? Well, it's really the point. I always remember, you know, because I mean, I've always been naughty all my life, bad behavior, always getting into trouble in the family, at school, everywhere I go, even in the Buddhist centers. I'm always a troublemaker, supposedly, whatever. And I know one time I had full of all this self-pity. I was Lama Yeshe's attendant for like a week in London. And it was like being in a washing machine. It was so intense. I can't even describe to you. I didn't know whether I was Arthur or Martha. So if you Americans, that's a very funny saying, but we say that in Australia and England. You don't know whether you're Arthur or Martha. These days, we don't know whether Arthur or Martha. We've got 4 other variations now, haven't we, in these days? Never mind that. Anyway, it was an incredible experience. So at some point I was feeling all this self-pity about my neurotic behavior, right? Because I'm always fighting with people or whatever. And I was all self-piteous and said to Lama, and I'll never forget, Lama Yeshe would just out of the blue, you know, like a flash of lightning, he'd just say about 3 words and it would blow my mind. So this time he said, just sort of like in passing, and it blew my mind. I can't tell. He said, there's nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behavior. And it was a revelation for me because, you know, when you're full of self-pity, you think, I am bad, you know, concrete I. And he said, nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behavior. It was a revelation. Suddenly I realized, oh, I'm okay. Just the way I behave, I better start controlling myself. Well, here I am still 45 years later trying to control my body and my speech, which is junior school entry-level Buddhism. Control your body and speech. I mean, if we could do that in our life, in our relationships, at work, at home, we would not have problems. It is such a profound piece of advice. We don't even think about it, you know, because we think I'm allowed to say what I want. I'm allowed to do what I want. We're so naive, we're so nihilistic, you know. But if we understood this instruction, it is profound practice. So then guess what? You know, one of the consequences of that is you begin to harness your crazy behavior energy. So then you suddenly have space to go to high school and start to see your mind, to get to the root of the problem, to become your own therapist, you know. So the delusions, when we start to look at these in high school, we start to see we've got at least 3 categories of states of mind. We have the neurotic, ridiculous, disturbing, unhappy, afflicted ones, the crazy ones. So now we can start to unpack and unravel them because they are the source of the problem. So now, as I've said, Buddha talks about 84,000, like this map of the mind, you know, 84,000 distinct neurotic states of mind. But luckily, thank you for him, thank you for us, he narrows them all down. They all subsume to 3. And if we can understand these 3, as simplistic as they sound to us, we really have a deep understanding of what Buddha's talking about, and we deeply can begin to understand ourselves and others. So that they've got a hierarchical relationship, these three. The root one is simply called ignorance, maripa, unawareness. So colloquially, we call it ego grasping when it relates to the misconception of the self. In general, we have a misconception, Buddha says, about everything. We have a misconception. This is the deepest delusion, has this deepest primordial misconception about the very ontological status itself of everything as they exist. It's the most primordial. And it's because it's so primordial, we don't even recognize it. That's why we've got to get calm abiding. As Lama Yeshe says, there's no way in the universe you can recognize that neurotic sense of self and then eradicate it. Not possible without calm abiding. So that root delusion, ego grasping, on the basis of the root delusion, which is this neurotic, fear-based, wrong sense of a concrete, solid, neurotic, self-pity, ridiculous me. On the basis of that assumption, we then have this enormous emotional hunger because that me feels miserable. Because of a grasping of that me, we feel miserable. So when this is attachment energy, the main voice of ego grasping. So that is effectively the main cause of our suffering in daily life, attachment, which sounds hilarious if we think of, modern psychology. It's this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction, which then gives rise to constant craving for something we think is missing, which then causes us to manipulate to get it, which causes us to then believe that Fred or whatever the object is utterly divine. As Lama Yeshe says, the mirror's dirty with this dust of attachment that makes the object look delicious. And then we believe that when I get that, I'll get happy. This is what drives us in our daily life every millisecond. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, when that attachment is thwarted, and that's 1,000 times a day, that's a third one. That's aversion. So like I said, attachment is multifaceted, or so is aversion. Attachment is emotional dissatisfaction, emotional hunger, manipulation, expectations, neediness, manipulating, expecting, possessing, and then believing that it's the cause of my happiness, so you've got to get it. Then when it doesn't get what it wants, that's aversion. And aversion can be the most volatile anger through the spectrum of annoyed, irritated, frustrated, despair, and depression. We all recognize all of these. So these three words are simple, but the implication is profound. So in high school, we're unpacking and unraveling these ones. We're not touching the ignorance so much yet. We're just looking at the main ones, attachment and aversion, and becoming more stable. We first control our body and speech. Already we get more stable. Then we start to unpack and unravel and start to stabilize the attachment and aversion and get even more stable, more in charge of our lives, catching the wheels when they're wobbling, not waiting for them to fall off because we're being our own therapist. Already amazing. Now we go into the Bodhisattva path and we get bodhicitta, which we've skipped over here because that's not part of Mahamudra. It's one of the preliminaries. And then we get to the last of the 6 perfections, which is concentration, calm abiding, and special insight. So now, special insight is the 6th one of the perfections of the Buddha, and that's insight into, not impermanence, not this, not that, not karma, but insight into the ultimate way that things exist, which is known as emptiness. That's the topic in Mahamudra. So I'm describing the kind of this traditional approach to it, not the Mahamudra approach, because it's helpful to understand intellectually what emptiness means, And of course, it's hard for us. We might have heard it for 40 years. We still can't quite get it because it's too primordial. And as Lama Yeshe said, as I read it yesterday, this reality that everything, the reality that everything has no intrinsic nature, this reality of everything that exists, the reality of everything that exists is that it has no intrinsic nature. Of course, that sounds so abstract to us. As Lama, another term for that is non-duality. So as Lama says, non-duality is not hiding from us. It's the nature of whatever exists. This computer, my voice, the statue behind me, the flower, the lamp shining on my face, each one of us, everything in front of us, the clock, the couch, everything is in its nature is empty of intrinsic existence. But because we've got a mirror full of a dirty mirror full of the dust of believing it's not like that, we see our own projection, not the reality. So in fact, it's like you're colorblind, It's a good example. If you're colorblind, I don't know how colorblindness works, but if something is pink, but you see it as blue, Because of your eyes not working, someone can tell you 1,000 times a day that it's not blue, but you see it as blue, and you believe it's blue, and it appears as blue. You might know intellectually, oh yes, maybe pink, but you believe in blue because it's staring in your face that it's blue. Now, the reality is pink is right there in front of you because of your mind being polluted, your mind, your mirror of, in this case, your eyes, but you know, the mirror of your mind is dusty, that causes it to appear to you as blue, when in reality it's actually pink. So pink isn't hiding from you. Pink is staring you in the face because your eyes are mistaken and you believe what you see. That's the analogy of the mind right now. The mirror, mirror of our mind, polluted, disturbed by, you know, the different delusions. So when attachment is in my mind, the cake looks delicious. It looks delicious. We don't think, oh, I'm making the cake look delicious. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as our mothers told us. This is a profound statement. We don't believe that for 1 second. When I look at that cake or I look at Fred, I don't think it's in my mind. I don't think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think beauty is in Fred's veins, as if in Fred himself out there shining beauty back at me, causing me to beg him, you know, it's kind of, he's begging me to love him, he's begging me to have him. Like as if beauty is coursing through his veins along with his blood. That's how things appear to us. If I'm angry with Fred, I don't think my mind is making up angry Fred. I think he is angry in his bones. The cake looks delicious in itself. This is exactly how all the delusions function, but specifically the ego grasping, the root one, the ignorance, the maripa. So even intellectually, we can begin to understand this, and this is a good start. But the mistake, you've been seeing things as pink for so long. You believe, you've been seeing things as blue for so long. I forget which one I said now. It's like it's really pink, but you think it's blue, okay? But you've been seeing it as blue for so long, and you've believed it's blue for so long. So it appears to you as blue, and you believe it's blue. Now, this is what Lama Zopa says, and this is what Buddha's saying. It's bad enough that things appear to us to have an intrinsic nature as this or that. It's bad enough that they appear to us like that. That's bad enough. But the killer, the thing that keeps us rooted in samsara is that we believe it. That's the killer. So as Lama Zopa says, even though it still appears to us as blue, you don't believe it's blue. You start chipping away at the belief. So even though it still appears to you as self-existent, as existing out there from its own side, having zero to do with me. That's how the world appears to us. And that's the root, the fundamental mistake. And it's a primordial mistake. And we've been making this mistake for eons, Buddha says. That's even what's creating us to even be reborn. So the general function of all the neuroses is they are liars. Attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of something. Aversion exaggerates the ugliness of something. They're both underpinned by the root delusion that causes the cake to be from its own side delicious. It causes the ugly Fred, once he's given me up for a younger version, to appear ugly from his own side. That's the function of the ego grasping that informs the attachment, informs the anger. It's the most subtle mistake. So what's the different? We're talking now the opposite method that Mahamudra is. Mahamudra is you go straight to the piano and intuit Bach. So we're doing the first one, which is the theory first and then the experience. And that's okay, we can go back and forth, you know. So what are these two truths then? It's one way of presenting the entire universe for the Buddha. So everything that does exist, the Buddha says, each has a conventional character, which is very specific to each phenomenon. And then everything that exists has an ultimate character. So emptiness is the shorthand for how everything exists ultimately. So we've got to unpack that word, see how we use it, see what Buddha means by it, the use of it, you know, it sounds so weird to us. And then the shorthand for the conventional existence is dependent arising. interdependence, as Lama calls it, dependent arising, that everything that does exist exists in dependence upon various factors. That's its conventional character. Now, Buddha teaches in general 3 kind of ways in which things exist, but there are many variations of these. And these are he's arguing with these different views that existed beforehand in the Hindu views. He's arguing with these different views. And many of these are different than their presentations of different views in Buddhist tenets about how things do exist and don't exist. So generally, you can say there are 3 levels of dependent arising, broadly speaking. The very first level of dependent arising is that all phenomena, all impermanent phenomena, including a self, a lamp, all the objects of our ordinary world, they all exist in dependence upon causes. You won't find anything among those causes that is that thing. And you won't find it among the causes, and you won't find it separately from the causes or among the causes. Because a thing like a self or a lamp is the result of those causes, is the culmination of those causes. Simple way of saying it. So there's many phenomena in the universe. And so first of all, to even discuss emptiness, we've got to first establish things as conventionally existent. This is very rigorous kind of logic. You can say, oh, that's an uha, and you can start believing in an uha. That's not enough. You can't do that. It's too wiki. It's too lazy. You've got to say what something is. You give it a name, you define it, you actually then come into an agreement in your conventional world about what it is, how it functions. You sign off on it, you all shake hands, and we all agree that is a lamp, that is a cup, that is a person. So what's a cup? You know, what's a cup, Mum? What's that shape? What's that thing over there, Mummy? Oh, that's called a cup, darling. What's a cup? Well, a definition, way we can say it here, it's got two parts. The first part tells you its conventional character. Oh, sweetheart, it's flat-bottomed container. And you see it, you understand those words, you learn and you get it, you see it, but you're not happy yet. Or flat-bottomed something, a pot, a flat-bottomed something, but you're not happy yet because you don't know, and this is a real point now, this is a huge one when it comes to understanding emptiness, understanding reality. But what does it do, Mummy? What is it? What's its job? What's its function? What does it mean? Yeah, it's flat-bottomed something or other made of clay. But what is it? And this is the second part of the definition, and that tells you what its job is, what its function is. And this is a huge thing. Oh, sweetheart, it holds my tea. Now you understand what it is. Now, but you don't believe your mother. You have to prove that she's right. Don't just believe her. She can make it up. She's got to prove it. So she gets her tea and she pours, and you will see, and she will see that in fact it fulfills that function. It holds her tea. Well, so far so good, but still not enough. We've now got to check that among our conventional world, there's no other valid cognition of that phenomenon that fundamentally contradicts that. So once you've established that, you sign the box, you tick off, and now you all shake hands and you agree that is a cup. Well, every phenomenon in the universe has to be like this. Now, this is getting things conventionally correct. Now, Buddha's saying this. Most of the time, we're not even getting things conventionally existing. We're not even getting things accurate conventionally. We make up garbage. We make up conspiracy theories every minute. We believe in absolute nonsense. So a very good step is to start at least getting things conventionally correct. At least calm your mind down and start recognizing, at least conventionally, that is a lamp, that is a computer, that is pink, that is blue. So the grosser delusions just cloud our minds so intensely that we believe there's a real thing existing called ugly Fred who causes me suffering. Buddha says that's not a conventional reality at all. Forget ultimate. So at least getting ourselves conventionally reasonable is a good start, I tell you. We'll start becoming a bit sane, you know. Then we've got to cut the root of the root delusion. That's why the first level of practice is at least control your crazy delusions. And then at least you're going to be more loving, more wise, more intelligent. That's conventional reality. At least you're on track conventionally, but they're still not finished yet. You've got to uproot even now the root delusion. So it's a gradual process of working on your mind, you know. So here we're trying to look into the way that things exist ultimately. But the first step is to establish them conventionally. So when you study Buddhist philosophy, you first learn this kind of map of the universe, the worldview. And the first thing you learn is, almost the first, is that there's various synonyms for that which exists. And why that's so crucial for the Buddha, because he's saying right now, like I just said, the delusions are causing us to live in la-la land about what exists. So we at least get clear conventionally. So there's several synonyms for that which exists. Phenomenon, object of knowledge, object, existent, established base. There's like 5, maybe there's more, excuse me. So whatever exists, this is a major point for the Buddha, whatever exists, Buddha says, even conventionally, is something that can be the definition of the word existent is that which can be cognized by mind. I mean, this is profound. That which exists is sealed at even conventional level by that which the mind can cognize. So it's axiomatic that what the mind can cognize is that which exists. So mind is central to everything in the universe for the Buddha. It's very powerful. So this is important because Buddha says we're living in la-la land right now, but not believing in phenomena that don't exist. We believe in a cake that's divinely delicious. It'll make me happy when I eat it. He says, don't be ridiculous. No such thing exists. We're living in demented la-la land. And this is just the relative level. Forget the emptiness level. At least sort out our attachment and our aversion and get past those and see at least conventionally, yeah, there is a chocolate cake there, but it has no divine nature that attachment thinks it has. An ugly Fred who just cheated on me has no ugly nature. These are conventions. Forget the ultimate. That's in high school. Get yourself a bit sane. Now we're ready to get to the root delusion, to uproot the root delusion. So we're trying to establish what exists and how they exist. This is what we're trying to eventually, this is what wisdom means in Buddhism. That's why you're doing Mahamudra, to see how things exist finally. Why? Because that's what cuts the nonsense. That's what cuts the nonsense. So when in meditation, whether it's using the Mahamudra technique or the other technique, or Tantra or whatever method is you're using, there are many methods. Once you finally, on the basis of calm abiding meditation, as Lama Yeshe says, you cannot get it without that, because you've got to access the microscope of your mind. That's what calm abiding allows you to do. Once you've got your first non-conceptual, direct, genuine insight into the truth that there never has been, isn't, and never could be an intrinsic I, that's what we're going to go into, what it is. That's your first moment of a realization of emptiness. And that's the first second you cut the root of samsara. And after that first second of that realization, you cannot fall back. You're climbing out of your samsara into your nirvana. You can't fall back after that. You can only go forward. You still have plenty of work to do, but that's the one we're aiming for. Your first moment of your direct, non-conceptual insight into the reality, the truth that there never has been, isn't, and never could be. That fantasy I we have believed in for eons. So this approach we're taking here, which is the opposite to the Mahamudra approach, is using intellect. And it's very tasty. So let's look at these two truths then, as a method for helping us get the ultimate truth. Okay, so let's use the phenomenon called I. It's the one we're most attached to, the one we think about most, the one that's the center of our universe is me, the object called me. So the words I, me, self are synonymous. So me, myself, I, self are all synonymous. They're all referring to this type of phenomenon. Not a lamp, not a toilet, not a mug, not a computer. We're referring to a person. But a person also a person. They're slightly different words. Person, self, I. They're all synonymous. So we're one of those. Buddha's one of those. A hell being is one of those. An ant is one of those. We're that type of phenomenon. We're a person. Okay. So self or I. These are all synonymous. So, okay. So this Buddha presents different levels at which we grasp at a fantasy I. The first one is we grasp, this is the grossest level. It's not even really getting into selflessness yet. We believe that things are, there's a particular view that Buddha argues with that posits a definite, concrete, unified, permanent, unchanging self. That's a really gross mistake. Then another level, a slightly subtle level of mistake, not the subtlest yet, and let's look into this analysis, okay? And I'm kind of conflating these first two views, but that's okay. So this one, you see, the first one, things exist in dependence upon causes. This more subtle level is that everything exists in dependence upon parts. So it sounds kind of boring. We know things have parts, but who cares, you know? But it's got a major meaning here. Let's look into it. So I, the object called I, is made of many parts. So then how do we divide those parts? Well, let's keep it really simple. We can divide them into two. Let's keep it simple. We can divide it into the mind and the body. The mind and the body, they're the components of the person. You're made up of mind and you're made up of body. Now, obviously, we're talking the Buddha's view here, not the materialist view. We're talking the Buddha's view that posits we've got a consciousness, which is not physical, and this body is imbued with that consciousness. The difference between these four elements and the four elements of this curtain behind me is that that's not imbued with a consciousness. The difference between the four elements of that flower and these four elements here is that this is imbued with a consciousness and they're not. This is all the four elements. It's the same as the flower, you know. So when there's a rotten carrot or there's a rotten rabbit's body with a mind that's gone, they're the same character. They're just rotten stuff. It's the four elements, you know. But when it's alive, the rabbit has a mind. It's a mind possessor. When this is alive, it's a mind possessor. That's the difference between the four elements there and the four elements here. Okay, this is Buddha's view. So we're made of the body and we're made of the mind. And then we know that perfectly well, the mind has got lots of parts. So what's the parts of the mind? Is each thought, each moment, all the negative parts, all the positive parts, all the thousands of thoughts, the love, the kindness, the anger, the jealousy. There's countless parts of our mind. Each of those are parts of our mind. And our body has got thousands of parts, haven't it? You know, it's thousands of parts. So this is like an analogy I like to use. I don't know if we used it recently. No, maybe we didn't here. But it's like IKEA. I think IKEA is a great example. You know, you buy, say you go to buy a Robina, you buy a me, you buy a Maria, you buy a Rod, you buy a Jean Marie. You're on the top line for me, you guys. I don't know where you are for you, but you're on the top line for me. So you're going to go and buy a Maria at IKEA. Because I have a box of, I want a Maria. So they ship the box to you and there's all the parts in there. It's a really nice example. There's all the bits and pieces of Maria in there, the nose and all the bits of the body, and you've got to construct it. It's quite difficult, but there it is. All the bits of the mind, or Maria's anger and her love and her kindness and her intelligence. Then there's all her body and her nose and her ligaments and her eyes and her ears. Many, many, many bits and pieces, all in this box, right? Now, this is already the first point. One of the points. That IKEA doesn't just chuck in 14 fingers randomly. There's exactly 10. There's exactly 10 toes. There's exactly the right number of ligaments, the right number of muscles, the right number of eyeballs, all the bits and pieces that make up Maria. So we're constructing gradually the Maria. Now, this is the point. We all believe that there's a part in there that we have to keep searching for that's called special mini me Maria, such that if you didn't put that little piece in at the end, there wouldn't be a Maria. It's sort of like the motor that you've got to put in, that now it's Maria. And that special piece that we believe is there, that special part, as my friend Penday says, walking hand in hand with all the other parts, that's the intrinsic me. That's the special little Maria in there, the mini me called Maria. And we believe that that's the boss. There's an I in there, a self in there that's the boss, that without which they wouldn't be Maria. And Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. You don't need a piece like that. All the bits and pieces of Maria do fine without a boss called Maria. But we impose this extra piece in there. And now look at our language. I have a hand. This is the analysis we have to do now. One of the many debates we need to do to use logic and analysis. The Buddha says, this particular debate says, if there's something that exists, if it exists, you have to point it out. So it has to be one thing. You have to point it out. So I will tell you some very simple statements. I've done this many times before. I will tell you, I have a lamp and a computer. So if that's a true statement, you have to count how many phenomena I stated. It's very clear. There are 3. I is one phenomenon. Here it is. There's another phenomenon called a computer, and the third phenomenon is called a lamp. So if that's a true statement, even conventionally, you have to say there are three separate phenomena. And that's a simple, if I say to you, I have a lamp and a computer, and you look over where I'm talking from, if we're in the same room, the first thing you'll do is you'll verify if I'm speaking the truth. And if I say I have an elephant, you'll feel sorry for me because you won't see an elephant. So you prove what I just said is true. You will count three phenomena, each of which is not the other. So the Robina is not the lamp is not the computer is not the Robina is not the computer. We can see this pretty quickly. You're going to find three, in this case, a very simple example, three separate, distinct, independent phenomena. That's called logic. It's called simple math. Now we get tricky. I will tell you that I have a nose and an ear. Now, without analysis, you will look over here and you will verify what I just said. This is Robina, there's a nose and an ear. We won't analyze it, but Buddha says we have to analyze it because we're making a mistake. Without realizing it. Now, okay, so first of all, how many phenomena did I mention? We know it was three, the same. Eye, nose, ear. So if this is true conventionally, it needs to be the same as the previous example. We need to point out three separate phenomena, each of which is not the other. So the ear and the nose are easy. Here they are, look, two separate things. So an ear, this is the point here, it functions and can exist without depending on a nose. The function of the ear, remember, is to hear things. The function of the nose is to breathe air. So the ear is not necessary for the nose to function, and the nose is not necessary for the ear to function. Precisely. So that's easy. We can point out the two. Now we have to point out the third phenomenon called eye, that is not the nose, that is not the ear, that is not all the other thousands of parts in that box IKEA sent. And that's the piece we instinctively feel is there. Somehow an I that's the motor that runs everything, that's the boss, like a puppeteer or like a mini me, or like the landlord, you know. We've got this deep, and we say that. We say it like that. You know, if Maria insults me, she says, oh, you have an ugly nose, Robina. And I say, how dare you insult me, Maria? And she'll say, no, I didn't insult you, Robina, I insulted your nose. We would laugh at that, but that's technically correct because we feel there is a part in here. We never analyze it, we never search for it, we just assume it's there. That's like this little mini me, the boss part. So, you know, one of the type of analyses we can do, the meditation we can do, is literally doing this job of deconstructing, like in IKEA, you do a reverse deconstruct. Like here's all the bits. So we're looking for the piece that's called I. And we'll be shocked to find there's no piece called I, but just the parts, how can there be an I? Because we assume there is a piece in there. There is a piece in here somewhere that bears the label I. This is the point now, that isn't the nose and isn't the ear. And so one of the mistakes is that it is the owner. We believe there's an owner in there. We say it, I have got so much anger. I have got so much beauty. You leave my nose alone, you know. We say it like that, and we implicitly mean there's a little owner in there that is the object of that label. And Buddha says you haven't got one like that. You don't even need one. The parts do fine working on their own. Now, this is not the final view yet, but it's already very tasty. And this is very shocking to us. Now, the point is this, at this simple level of trying to do the analysis, if there is a separate I in there, this little I that's the owner, if it's separate, which means you can point it out, which means it isn't the ear and isn't the nose, it's a separate piece. If there is a separate piece, in just the same way that when I break the lamp, because it is independent and separate from the computer. My computer won't mind. My computer is working nicely. It can look away as the lamp falls over and feel sorry for the poor lamp, but the computer is untouched because they don't depend upon each other. Even my ear and my nose. If you cut my ear off, there won't be pain here. There'll be pain here. And my nose won't suddenly stop functioning because they're independent of each other in the simplest sense of their function. So, if there is a separate I, a special little piece called I, that isn't the nose, that isn't the eye, that isn't the ear, that isn't the teeth, that isn't the love, that isn't the anger, that isn't the thousands of other parts, but is a distinct separate piece. If there is such a piece, then obviously when my ear hurts, my eye will be looking on feeling sorry for the ear. It won't be affected. Now, we know this is not true. So this is where it gets more subtle, more nuanced. We know we say, I am feeling pain, and that's not wrong, but it's a more subtle meaning we have to get used to, because you can't pinpoint that I. Why? Because this is the subtlest one, that I is merely the name we label upon all the bits and pieces. Out of convenience, we say, I am suffering. But we're not meaning a special separate I. It's just merely labeled I. And this is the final conclusion we have to come to. So, of course, it's a fine point. It's a subtle point. It's highly nuanced. But this is what we have to get to. So the two truths, right now, we have extreme views. So whenever we hear the words, there is not a single atom of anything here that is the I. The I is completely empty of existing independently. That's the real word, that all inherent, self-existent, from its own side, in and of itself, existing naturally. There are many synonyms, and they all are synonyms for there's no independent I. There's no I in here that's independent of the parts. And finally, there is no I in here that's independent of the mind that calls it I. So when we hear that, when we hear the I is empty, that's the truth, the ultimate truth. But because we have this misconception, we hear it as, oh dear, there's no I, and we throw the baby out with the bathwater. I might as well kill myself, there's no I. I've looked and I can't find an I. So as His Holiness says, the I is not empty because you can't find it, and you can't find it. That's not the real premise. The I is empty of existing independently because it is a dependent arising. So this is the two truths together. But right now, when we hear emptiness, we hear nothingness. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. We fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa says. That's where we run, and we can't. And that's the deepest, worst, most outrageous mistake we make in the world and in the literature and people's misunderstanding of emptiness. Therefore, there is no I. And you're right, you won't find one, but that's not the real premise, and you've got to go further. That's nihilism. Oh, well, there's no I, might as well die. Oh, there's no cause and effect, there's no this, there's no that, might as well kill myself. That's nihilism, and it is not the meaning of emptiness. But that's the wrong view we go flying off the handle. We chuck the baby out the bathwater. It's a great mistake. Now, as soon as we hear dependent arising, as Lama Zopa says, there is an I that does exist, but exists in dependence upon the mind calling it that. As soon as we hear that there is an I that does exist interdependently, we go to the other extreme and we grasp, oh, thank God there is an I after all. So that we overestimate the I, and here we underestimate, and we go between, like drunken sailors, between these two extremes. Not, eternalism, there is a thing from its own side, or there's nothing. And we can't hear the reality of the two truths. So when we're on the right track, whenever we feel, when we get a sense that something is empty, as Rinpoche says, he says, when you realize the emptiness of the I, or whatever else it is, he says, it's as if there's no I, but there is. Dependent arising. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So it's something is empty. It's as if there's no I there, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. So this is like a tricky way the yogis have. It sounds just like being tricky, but that's the yogi's experience. So the two truths go together. They don't contradict. And when we start to be on track there, as Nagarjuna says, or Chandrakirti says, or whoever, now we're on track with understanding Buddha's teachings. The two truths are the flip side of the same coin, you know, dependent arising and emptiness. These are the words, few words. So as Lama Yeshe says, in this approach, we have to squeeze our brains, you know. I like that. Nothing wrong with squeezing our brains. We've got very good brains. We squeeze our brains all day with our stupid rubbish. Why not squeeze our brains with good stuff, you know? We squeeze our brains all day about how mean that person was, analysing it in great depth for 5 hours. We'll do the same with this one. Use your brains for the good stuff. So now, full stop, turn the page, new chapter. Let's look at the word emptiness, because that throws us completely, you know. Okay, let's look at this. Do you want a 5-minute break? I have a 5-minute break. New chapter, turn the page. 5-minute break. Okay.